Now that we've gotten our first automation under our belt, we're going to create a second one. The second one is going to do pretty much the same thing, but I'm going to show you a completely different way to do it. There are lots of different ways to approach automations inside of Airtable, so you're not limited by one way of doing things. And even with sending this email, you can send it through an Airtable email automation, or you can send it through your Gmail or Outlook. So there are lots of different options. One of the things you can do when your automation is somewhat similar is you can actually make a duplicate of it. Now, for what we're doing here, it really doesn't matter all that much. But in the future, when you have multi-step automations or when something is very similar, I think this is a very good shortcut to use. In this case, I'm just going to create a brand new automation. Okay, so Airtable is giving me this warning saying my automation isn't live. That's completely fine. This is a test space, but in the future, when you do want to set up an automation, you want to make sure you're naming it as something that you'll remember 6 months or a year down the road when you need to maintain it. And then 2, you want to make sure you turn it on once you're done the setup. So our automation 2 is going to be called send notification to Assignee via Gmail. For our second automation, instead of using when a record matches a condition as our trigger, I would actually like to use when a record enters a view as our trigger. So you're going to choose when a record enters a view. However, we don't actually have a view to trigger this automation using. So I'm going to create a new tab into the same base, and then we're going to actually create a view inside of the task table to trigger from. I'm going to repurpose the view we were looking at earlier because it's a very similar email automation, so I'm actually just going to rename the view. I'm going to call this send Gmail email to notify the assignee. Very often what I do with my automation views is I want some kind of visual cue so that I know this is an automation view. When you set up an automation view as part of a trigger, you want to make sure you protect it as much as you can so that other people don't make edits to it. So for example, if someone removes a filter accidentally, you might end up sending hundreds or thousands of emails by accident. So what we're going to do is add a visual cue. I like to add in an emoji in front of the view or after the name of the view, just to note to myself that this is an automation view. Or this view is a trigger for one of our automations. So looking at this view, you can see that I've wrapped the name of the view into gear emojis. Then I'm going to set up a filter. Once again, I'm going to set up the filter so that my assignee is not empty. Just for the sake of demonstration, on my internal team members table, I'm also going to remove one of the emails from my assignees. Let's remove it from add-ins. Now back on our tasks table, in the trigger view, we see that There are 5 tasks that have assignees attached to them, but there are only 4 tasks that have both the assignee and the email. So very similar to our last automation we just set up, we actually want to also set up that second filter so that our automation does not misfire when there's no email to even notify. And once we've added in that second filter, now we only have 4 potential records that could trigger our automation. So back in the automation configuration page, we're going to select a view that we want to use as our trigger. That's going to be on the task table. And I'm going to look for the view with the 2 gear icons. Once you see you can choose the correct set of records, you can go ahead and pick a record to use as your example. Before we go to configure the action step, one of the very important things we want to do in our view is to lock it. Again, we don't want people to make changes to this. If someone accidentally removes both of the filters, that means I'm triggering automation potentially 10 times, potentially hundreds of times. And if there is no assignee, or if there's no email, or if someone had already been emailed, we don't want those emails to actually trigger multiple times. So what we can do here is change this collaborative view into a locked view. And when you're locking a view, you can always give a reason. My reason is going to be this is a trigger view for an automation. After you've locked the view, you can see that I can no longer update any of the filters, hide fields, grouping conditions inside of my view. Next, we're going to add an action. And this time, instead of using Airtable's default send email, we're going to use the Gmail integration. You can scroll down to find that Gmail icon, then click on Send Email. Once again, you want to add in a label or a description. Next, you're going to select which Gmail account you want to use. For mine, I have mine set up already, but if you want to connect a new Gmail account, you will need to log in. Once you log in, you'll be able to connect your account and then select that Gmail account in your Airtable automation step. The to field is once again going to be a merged field, so we're going to grab it from our trigger record. And once again, this is our assignee email. The subject could be something very similar, a new task for you, and then the task name. The message can also be very similar. We're going to say hi, the first name, and then show them some information about the task. All right, earlier we didn't have our assignee first name. So now I'm actually going to go ahead and build a lookup field to pull in the assignee's first name. I'm just creating a assignee first name field, and now we can see Lucy and Cherry. A lot of these fields, when you start to build these automations, might seem a little bit redundant because you've already got the assignee where you see their name and also the assignee first name. But they are very different because the assignee first name is the one that's going to make our emails sound more natural. And in my first step, I'm just going to make sure I choose the record again. Anytime you add a field or update a field with information in it, you always want to re-pull your trigger record. And this time, I think I'm actually going to use Lucy's record instead, because we already tested with mine earlier. So I'll keep configuring the action step. I'm going to select Lucy's first name. Once again, I'm going to add in some information from Airtable's record. Next, we're going to include some information about the task itself. This time you can see that the information you can include has significantly been limited. It will happen when you're using a Gmail email integration. So another option we can use is to actually format our own email. So I'm going to include the fields I want one by one. You've just included the task name, but you also want to make sure that people know that it's a task name. So in plain text, I'm going to type in the task name. I will also want to know who the assignee is. And the start and due date. After I've got my field names in, it's just a matter of mapping all of the fields correctly. Sometimes what we'll also include is a link to that Airtable record itself. And you can include the Airtable record URL. Next, I'm going to generate a preview. This is looking pretty good. And I'll run the test as configured. So in a moment, I should get another email. You can take a look at this email here. It's got all of the right information that we've mapped. And this to field is now Cherry plus Lucy. So this was my test email that I added in earlier. You can see that this test Cherry plus Lucy still came into my inbox. One more thing I wanted to go through on these emails is that you can also format them with bolding, with italics, so that it can be a little bit more helpful and easy on the eye. In our automation page, you can see this message from Airtable that you can use markdowns, like HTML to format your text. There's a little link here called "and more," where Airtable has a support article to show you all of the markdowns they accept. Let's go through some very basic markdown syntax. I think these ones will be helpful for you in the future. The bolding is one that will come in use, and so are the italics. So I'm going to copy this information. If it's got 1 star next to it, it's going to be italicized, and if it's got 2 stars next to it, it's going to be bold. So I'm going to adjust the formatting in my email to make this easier on the eye. Once I've updated this email text, I'm going to click on Generate a Preview again. Once that's done, I can see that my task name, assignee, start date, and due date have been bolded, and the URL itself has been italicized. And you can run as configured if you like. It's completely up to you. Next, I want to show you more options and what this includes. Once you click on Show More Options, you have the ability to CC someone else on your team. So if you're emailing a customer or if you're emailing a member of your team, you might want to CC other relevant parties. You can also set the from name. I'm going to set the from name to the Best Airtable course. And one very cool thing that you can do is you can actually set a reply to email. So even if you're going to send this email from a general info@yourcompany.com, you can still set the reply to a specific person. And it could be their account management team, it could be this is a shipping notification, you could always send the reply to the shipping team. This is going to be very helpful in helping your customers direct their responses to the correct person. Once again, I'm going to generate a preview, and the sender is going to be the Best Airtable course. And we can also run that automation again as configured. And finally, this is what our email looks like. You can see that the sender is Best Airtable course, which is who we set. You can obviously set this to your name or to the department at your company. And you can see the bolding that we did in line to reformat the email, and also the italicized text for the URL. So that wraps up how you can set up a Gmail automation, some scenarios that we've run into. I also wanted to talk about another step that you can add to your email automations to make them more responsive and more robust. Back on our tasks table, let's go ahead and add another assignee. So even if you add an assignee, your automation in theory will have sent, but it's very hard to know whether your automation sent or not. And especially for right now, when our automations are not even on, of course, nothing's getting sent. But even if they were on, we would have no feedback loop to know whether or not that email was actually sent unless we looked at the run history. So let me turn on this email automation and go back to the data. Back in the data itself, I can attach Cherry as an assignee. And now we can see that the automation has ran successfully. That's great. We got an email. However, inside of the data table, there's nowhere that indicates to us whether that email is sent successfully or not. So that's something that we're going to want to change. I'm going to add a notification called Assignee Notification Sent. This is going to be a very simple checkbox that our automation is going to check off once the email has been sent. Back on our automation tab, I'm going to add a third step. When you're editing your automation, I recommend turning it off. We can add a new action to update a record. And once again, we can enter a description. And we're going to check off the checkbox to say the email has been sent. We're going to select a table, which is tasks. And this part is interesting. The record ID is going to be the Airtable record ID of the original triggering record. It's very important to understand the concept of this Airtable ID because usually we identify or think about records in terms of their record name. For example, our internal assignees are going to be Cherry, Sarah, and Adam, and we really recognize those people by names. And even for our tasks, we have task 10, tweet number 4, etc. What Airtable does on the back end is that every single record inside of Airtable has a unique record ID. And before, when we were talking about Airtable formulas, there was a formula that would grab you the Airtable record ID. And this record ID is what we're going to use in our automation to specify which record do we want to update. So in this case, the record ID is RECA and then ends in HV7. If we wanted to verify, we can go to the tasks table and make sure that record ID is correct. So once again, for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to create a column called record ID. And you can click on Create the Field. So now looking through these record IDs, you can see RECA and then HV7 is the record we were looking at. That was assigned to Lucy, and that was the most recent record we used for our test. So back in our configuration page, we can now choose the field we want to update. And that's our checkbox field for whether the assignee notifications were sent. And the default you want to fill it at is checked. You can also generate a preview to see what will happen. And this is the update that the third step or the second action in the automation is going to make. I'm going to go ahead and run that as configured. You can see that the checkbox was checked. And you can even look on the right side to see the history. The history is going to show you that our automation step was the one that updated this checkbox field. So now let's turn our automation on and see it run once again. I've added myself to another record, or I've assigned myself to another record, and you can see that this checkbox was automatically checked. And you can see in my email that I got a notification for task 7, which was the record I just assigned myself to. Thanks for investing in your own knowledge base. I'm Cherry Yang, the founder of Claribase. We're going to be releasing our flagship course, Airtable Mastery, for free. In the course, you can find over 100 videos on topics like design, integration, automations, and interfaces. It's perfect for the Airtable champion who wants to build their database right the first time. You can sign up for the course at the link down below.